Good morning. We are honored today to welcome to the Heritage Foundation Ambassador George Christian Mayor, the Romanian ambassador to the United States, to share his thoughts on the US-Romanian missile defense cooperation efforts. And Romania has set an example in defending NATO allies from short and medium-range ballistic missile threats. It is the first ally to host the Aegis Ashore ballistic missile defense site in Europe, which became operational in May of 2016. Ambassador Mayor has served as Romania's ambassador to the United States since September 17, 2015. Between 1992 and 1997, he was a diplomat in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And between 1997 and 1999, he was chargé d'affaires at the Romanian Embassy in Ireland. Between 2000 and 2004, he held the position of State Secretary and head of the Department for Euro-Atlantic Integration and Defense Policy in the Ministry of National Defense. In that capacity, he was responsible for coordinating Romania's NATO accession process. In 2004, he was conferred the rank of ambassador. In November 2004, Mr. Mayor was elected senator in the Romanian parliament, where he held various key positions. In 2006, the ambassador was appointed the fourth director of the Romanian Intelligence Service, and during his 8 years at the helm of that agency, the service went through an extensive reform process, which allowed it to strengthen bilateral and multilateral partnerships with the most important intelligence services in the democratic world, as well as to gain and consolidate a high level of public confidence. In 1992, Mr. Mayor received his Master's of Law degree at George Washington University, Washington, D.C., and in 1997, he was conferred a Ph.D. in international law at the, I'll probably get this wrong, Babas Bolyoy University in, okay, good. Thank you, sir. He is a university professor at the Department of International Relations and European Integration within the National School of Political Studies and Public Administration in Bucharest. Ambassador Mayor has published a great number of articles and books covering topics from human rights and public law to international relations, strategic thinking, security, and intelligence studies. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Ambassador Mayor.
Well, good morning, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Dr. Spohr, for this kind introduction. I would like to thank also your team for this invitation and for convening this event on missile defense cooperation between United States and Romania. Let me also express my gratitude to the Heritage Foundation for its really exceptional leadership on relevant matters on international security. Just last year, in fact, the Heritage Foundation hosted the Romanian president, Mr. Klaus Iohannis, during his official visit to Washington, D.C., and it was a dedicated public event, an opportunity, in fact, to outline the strong strategic partnership between United States and Romania. And let us also remember that during the meeting of our two presidents, we welcomed the US president expressing his strong commitment to our partnership, as well as for the first time then, very interesting, to the Allied collective defense, to the Article 5 of the Washington Treaty during a common press conference in the Rose Garden. Well, in my remarks today, I would like to refer first to the overall threats to our security that we all share, and how we are working with the US and with allies to address them. Second, please allow me to point to the US-Romanian missile defense cooperation and the perspectives of this cooperation. And third, to re-emphasize that our bilateral cooperation constitutes a meaningful contribution to NATO development of missile defense capability. Ladies and gentlemen, the security environment today is of course marked by unpredictability and great power competition, a fact witnessed actually over the past years and recognized, of course, in the recent US national security strategy. Over the past years, we have seen overall negative developments in international affairs, unfortunately. Europe and the United States have been confronted with a resurgent Russia, with its aggressive conduct in the region east of NATO border, as well as in many aspects of our societies. Such conduct included, if you remember, the Russian invasion of Georgia, the 2014 annexation of Crimea, and as I've mentioned, the continuous Russian involvement and aggression in eastern Ukraine, the use of hybrid warfare tactics, of influence and propaganda tactics, and the use of cyber actions in an attempt to interfere in the election processes in Europe and elsewhere, even here. We have seen a rapid Russian military build-up in Crimea, which, by the way, it's only 100 less, in fact, than 150 miles from Romanian shores, than practically from a NATO shore. The deployment of anti-access and area denial system and other military assets in the Black Sea area. Aside from their control of the area, these assets are also a means to project power beyond this region, so beyond even the Black Sea, towards the southeastern part of the Mediterranean, and with the connections to Syria even. Russia's actions reflect an approach based on the use of force and geopolitical competition, while rejecting cooperation and engagement. This approach manifests itself across the whole eastern flank of NATO, practically from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. Such developments in the east of NATO confirm the strategic importance of the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea regions for the whole Euro-Atlantic area, and reflect the need to consolidate NATO's deterrence and defense posture. In this regard, the United States committed to European security and continues to commit. We welcome robust political statements on the U.S. commitment to its allies, including the strong references in the U.S. strategic documents. I mentioned the National Security Strategy, but also the National Defense Strategy and the Nuclear Posture Review. Also, constant increases in the funds allocated to the European Deterrence Initiative and the presence of U.S. forces in Europe are indicative, of course, of this approach. In this context, border sharing plays an important role. Romania takes its commitments very seriously. We continue practically to allocate 2% of the GDP for defense and use a significant share of this budget, I will say around 40%, towards military procurement capabilities and readiness over the next decade. This is a cross-party agreement to allocate 2% for defense. It was a process initiated by the President, and again, it's a long-term commitment of Romania to increase its spending on defense and develop its capabilities for a strong deterrence posture in the region, and of course a strong contribution to the collective defense of NATO. Last year, for example, we initiated significant investments in our defense especially in areas connected with missile defense. For example, we signed a 4 billion deal for the purchase of 7 Patriot systems, which are completely, of course, interoperable with allied capabilities. And these systems will be operational according to our planning at the end of next year, or at least the beginning of 2019-20. This year also we concluded the acquisition of a high mobility artillery rocket system, which also will contribute to this posture of deterrence in the region. We also signed an agreement for armored transporters and continue with prospects to acquire more F-16s. We already acquired 12, but we want to reach 48, the number of F-16 helicopters and multi-role corvettes for the Black Sea. These projects present, of course, opportunities for practical cooperation also between our defense industries. Now, turning to my main point, missile defense cooperation. We believe that all of us, we continue allies to face major ballistic missile threats, and this is widely acknowledged. North Korea's heated rhetoric, significant testing of vectors with increased ranges can hold both United States and Europe at risk. We look forward, though, to future opportunities for dialogue, as we've seen recently, that should result, hopefully, in safeguarding international peace and security. Against some UN Security Council resolutions, also Iran has continued to develop a ballistic missile program and to aim for the increase of range and sophistication of its ballistic arsenal. And unfortunately, we witness a growing interest from non-state actors to acquire and use advanced missile technology, which poses an immediate risk to our populations, of course, forces, and territories. This demonstrates clearly that the threat posed by proliferation of ballistic missiles is real. It's not just a regional threat, but a global one that affects each and every one of us. And therefore, we think we need more missile defense, not less. We have seen the robust US approach on missile defense in the past year, and we are looking forward to the upcoming missile defense review, where allied cooperation and burden sharing play, of course, an important role. And we think that the cooperation on missile defense between US and Romania may provide an example in this regard. NATO, of course, has acknowledged the ballistic missile threat at the Lisbon summit in 2010 and decided to develop an allied missile defense capability. The aim of this capability is to provide full coverage and protection for all NATO European populations, territory, and forces against the increasing threats posed by the proliferation of ballistic missiles. A significant political decision, strategic decision reaffirmed by all summit declarations since then. Within this context and sharing a strategic partnership with the US, Romania's decision to host the first Aegis Ashore of the US-European phase adaptive approach came as a natural contribution to the development of the NATO ballistic missile defense capability, apart from our bilateral relationship, strategic relationship with the US. Romania's participation in the missile defense has enjoyed strong political and public support. Practically, the ballistic missile defense agreement between US and Romania, negotiated in fact between 2010 and 2011, was signed and ratified almost unanimously by the Romanian parliament in 2011. The construction works of the Aegis Ashore broke ground in October 2013, and they were completed by the end of 2015. The Aegis Ashore site was inaugurated on May 12, 2016, and command and control was transferred to NATO at the Alliance Warsaw Summit of that year, thus extending the coverage of the Allied system. This exceptional cooperation on missile defense with the United States remains a confirmation of the US commitment to the European security and defense and a guarantee of our transatlantic bond. Thus, the first Aegis Ashore has a strategic value on all counts. Also, Romanian investments in capabilities such as in the Patriot systems I've mentioned reflect the importance my country places on missile defense cooperation towards a more interoperable and integrated NATO missile defense architecture. This leads to my third point, the importance of our missile defense cooperation for NATO as a whole. Last year, as the Aegis Ashore was made operational and transferred to NATO at the Warsaw Summit, the Alliance declared the NATO BMD initial operational capability. This is a practical result and a contribution then to the overall Allied defense and deterrence. More allies contribute to this capability, of course. Germany hosts the Allied Command Center, Turkey hosts the US Early Warning Radar, Spain hosts 4 US Aegis ships in Rota, Denmark and the Netherlands upgrade ships with radar capabilities, UK contributes with ground-based radars, and Poland will host a second Aegis Ashore site very shortly. As allies, we attach great importance to the development of the NATO BMB capability towards achieving full operational capability. This capability, combined with nuclear and conventional capabilities, has become part of NATO's overall strategy for credible deterrence and defense. Therefore, NATO BMB is a long-term investment against a long-term threat, we believe. It proves that NATO is capable to adapt to actual threats, demonstrates commitment of allies to share the burden for this important capability, and specifically reduces the risk to allies posed by ballistic missiles, both through the deterrence and the protection it provides. The NATO missile defense capability, as well as the Aegis Ashore missile defense facility, has been an entirely defensive project and endeavor, developed in the spirit of cooperation and transparency. They do not aim, and I underline this, to affect strategic stability or undermine in any way Russia's strategic nuclear deterrent. Russia also claimed that NATO missile defense and the Aegis Ashore violate the INF treaty. This claim is clearly false. The Aegis Ashore system cannot be used to launch missiles covered by the INF treaty. Ladies and gentlemen, today, as the United States is in the process of updating its missile defense review, we reflect how important missile defense cooperation with allies and partners is for responding to threats to our peace and security. And in conclusion, it highlights the strategic importance of the Aegis Ashore project that fits into a larger regional context. It contributes and demonstrates the US and allies' capacity to adapt to new and sophisticated challenges. It underscores the relevance of the burden sharing, solidarity, and indivisibility of security within NATO and the solidity of the regional missile defense architecture. And we believe it consolidates the transatlantic link and overall collective defense of NATO. So thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your commentaries or questions on this very interesting topic. Thank you very much.
So the ambassador has agreed to take some questions. I don't know if we have we do have a microphone, and so if you would raise your hand, give us your name and an affiliation if you have one, and wait until the microphone gets. Any questions?
Thank you so much for your excellent remarks, Michaela Dodge, Heritage Foundation. Sir, how did you get to that broad political consensus in Romania to support US missile defense cooperation? Because it was much more kind of contentious issue in other countries, for example, in the Czech Republic. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very good question. First, historically, there is a very good perception in Romania on cooperation with US. As our best ally, I think constantly opinion polls show the support of 70 to 80% for this cooperation. And I think in terms of viewing this project as a security project to also defend our populations, it was supported also by the public opinion. Of course, the government and the parliament had a good communication strategy in this respect. I understand there were some problems in the Czech Republic because also of certain propaganda, let's say, measures undertaken by some external forces, but this is another aspect and sensitive question. Again, we are very much in favor of US-Romanian cooperation at the level of the public opinion, and this fits into this cooperation, the missile defense project. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lauri Melkso. I'm a fellow here at Woodrow Wilson Center, otherwise international law professor in Estonia. You know, Russians always ask back in terms of these kind of NATO deployments that, you know, who are you afraid of, or who is threatening you? So politically, countries like yours and mine, Estonia, we always need to answer these questions. The thing with Romania is that Romania has also an interesting neighboring country in the east, the Republic of Moldova, a part of which used to be, main part of which used to be part of Romania in the interwar period. And I wanted to ask you, also considering your past jobs, how do you see the current situation there in terms of both Republic of Moldova as well as this Transnistria part?
Thank you. A very interesting question indeed. And your commentary also. What I will respond also a bit to this commentary when we are asked, the Baltic states, Romania, Poland, what are we afraid of? The answer is sometimes very simple. We witness developments in our region which are very negative from a security point of view, like what happened in Crimea, the acquisition, illegal acquisition practically of territory near NATO borders. What happened with cyber attacks in the Baltics area, which were very intense and critical in terms of their intensity on the infrastructure of those countries. What happened in Ukraine, eastern part of Ukraine, again, at our borders. So those are concrete material facts that really require a response and a program of deterrence on behalf of NATO and those countries. And I'm glad that they are cooperating well also in a so-called B9 format, all the countries from the Baltic states to the Black Sea on the eastern flank of NATO, have common conferences, gather together to re-emphasize the need for NATO to maintain solidarity with these type of challenges. And those are great developments in terms of our solidarity also in this region. With respect to Moldova, of course, it's a very important year now for Moldova. They will have elections very soon. Now they have in place a pro-European government. They have an EU agreement. They are trying, struggling with reforms to, let's say, accelerate their European project, which is not easy because the country still suffers from economic backlash and from all sorts of threats to their democracy because of their big neighbors. But it's a pro-European government. It depends very much on the outcome of these elections, the orientation of this country. We are trying ourselves, together with other European allies, to assist as much as possible Moldova in terms of developing their reforms, in terms of economic assistance. For example, Romania, besides, I think, US, is the largest donor in terms of funding for Moldova each year. All sorts of interconnectivity projects in terms of energy, just to enhance their energy security and energy independence, because they're very dependent, of course, on Russian gas and electricity. All sorts of things that we are doing either at the European Union level or on a bilateral basis to consolidate this trend, which is still positive. Of course, it has its ups and downs, but still pro-European. We must be very careful, however, in terms of the future prospect of this country, in terms of the political forces that will confront themselves in the next election. And we hope that the population, which still needs to see the benefit of getting closer to the European Union, will support the European path of this small country, Moldova, but very important and significant in terms of its position there in the region. Transnistria, it's again a frozen conflict. This is an aspect that preoccupies us. There are so many frozen conflicts on the eastern, let's say, NATO frontier. Frozen conflicts are being used also by Russia as a factor in their policies in the region that can always be, let's say, stimulated in a negative sense to erupt in open conflicts, in hot conflicts, let's say. And this is not good for the stability and the security of the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. My name is Denitsa Nikolova. I'm from the Heritage Foundation. And my question was, clearly Romania has such a strong cooperation with the US, and especially with Saber Guardian 2017. And the eastern flank of NATO has assurance from the US. How can we move forward to continue supporting you and continue giving you that assurance and holding down the eastern flank?
Well, that's a very good question. Thank you. I think we need, and we are approaching a NATO summit very soon, this summer, this June. Still at the level of US support for NATO to further their presence on the eastern flank, irrespective if we talk of the Baltic area or the Black Sea area, of enhanced presence or that type of notions used in NATO. We need to see more capabilities in terms of creating a solid environment for strong deterrence in light of these actions. And of course, US is critical in this respect. Also, there are those projects I've mentioned, common cooperation on various new systems for deterrence. US is needed also from this perspective to have a greater presence in terms of our common exercises. You mentioned that exercise, which was the biggest one practically in the history of the cooperation of allies with US. We need to show solidarity. We need to show capacity to react quickly to various crises. We need political support. So those are aspects that we've discussed continuously with the US government, and we're pleased that we've received a positive response, not only us, but of course other allies from the region, Poland, the Baltic states, Bulgaria, etc. Thank you.
Sir, you mentioned, Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned the missile defense review that's underway. We think that'll come out maybe next month. Was wondering what you would, if you had a chance to write it or if you could influence it, what would you like to see in that defense review, missile defense review? Thank you.
Thank you. I would have wished to have the chance to write it, but that's not the case. Anyway, apart from re-emphasizing the importance of missile defense in this overall strategic environment, which is exposed to threats from ballistic missiles, and that's clearly an objective of this review, to make it more robust, to develop it according to the actual threats, to see highlighted also those types of cooperation that you have in the area of missile defense, like the one with Romania, which is a successful cooperation, a model that can be expanded according, of course, to the security environment. I've mentioned the fact that the next project, which is underway right now, is with Poland. It's very important to see that projects being successful for NATO and for the region. But there are other prospects in other parts of the world where you have cooperation of such type, and I think emphasizing the fact that it works so well also in the missile defense review, it will be good for understanding the relevance of missile defense today in today's environment.
Thank you so much. So we talked about missile defense review. You mentioned briefly the nuclear posture review. What was Romanian perspective on the new 2018 nuclear posture review?
Yes, I think first of all, highlights a continuity with policies from the past. It expresses the relevance of nuclear deterrence, nuclear NATO posture. So we're very satisfied with this review.
Rachel Zesimos with the Heritage Foundation. How has missile defense contributed to the cohesion of NATO, and how does an Aegis Ashore site advance NATO's missile defense capabilities?
Well, I mentioned in my presentation that it was integrated into NATO ballistic missile defense. Practically, it advanced that defense in NATO with covering areas that were not previously covered by missile defense, according to an analysis of the threat environment. I mentioned Iran. So practically parts of the eastern flank of NATO, the southern part of NATO were not central European part of NATO were not covered by missile defense. So integrating this project into NATO ballistic missile defense practically covers almost the entire territory of NATO. Of course, with the development in Poland, it will be covered completely. So that's a great addition to ballistic missile defense in NATO and a contribution to collective defense.
Hi, good morning, sir. John O'Connell, National Guard Bureau. So, talking about the expansion of the partnership into Poland, being someone who's served in Poland before, I know that interoperability is a very important concept when it comes to NATO security cooperation. Could you describe the strategy that's being used to increase interoperability with the Polish military and the Poles? Thank you.
Yeah, we have an excellent strategic partnership. Practically, we are the biggest countries in that part of Europe with the biggest military capabilities. So we have a constant dialogue with Poland. In practical terms, we've decided to allocate a battalion for this multinational brigade in Poland on a permanent basis over there. We have common exercises in a multilateral or bilateral format, exchange of information. So it's a very good cooperation with Poland in the region.
Hello, Ambassador again. Denisa Nikolova. I was actually interested to hear you speak about propaganda during the decision of supporting missile defense in Romania, and I was just really interested to hear you speak about how the ups and downs of it as you were gathering support and whether it influenced public opinion or not, and hear more about it.
It's a very sensitive issue. So, yeah, well, overall it's a very pressing issue in Europe, as we've noticed. We don't speak only about propaganda, we speak about active measures, we speak about cyber attacks, we speak about those complex new tools used with sophisticated technology to create, let's say, questions inside societies with respect to our allied contribution, for example, to create disunity among allies, to influence decision-making, either in Brussels or in NATO, in EU, to create skepticism with respect to funds allocated, for example, for defense. There are this type of propaganda saying, okay, you have problems with social problems, health problems, you need funds for education, why do you spend so much on defense, as a continuous rhetoric. So this type of actions are very well coordinated, very well pointed to various states in not only Romania, but I spoke about Poland, other states, of course, in Central and Eastern Europe, but also Western Europe. With, again, the aim to create disunity, to create a lack of solidarity, to create skepticism, to generate decisions that are not favorable in terms of allied solidarity. We have in place measures to counteract such type of propaganda, various measures. We discussed this also in an allied context. It's not easy because it's a new type of, let's say, I won't say war, but a new type of an extension of power through sophisticated narratives and other type of means to enhance the projection of power. So it's an aspect that we need to reflect upon and to see what are the best measures, intelligent measures to counteract them and to also convince our publics of our course of action, which is positive in terms of a certain notion of peace and stability in the region and in Europe. I hope I was at least a bit clear.
I know Romania has made a lot of strides towards making sure that those intelligent measures across the alliance are being fortified, and obviously
Yeah,
for your support.
yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, Ambassador. Fred Bartos from the Heritage Foundation. On your prepared remarks, you started talking about EDI and the role that it has played in both in Romania and in Europe. Can you expand a little bit on that? How have the European Deterrence Initiative actually played out, both as a signaling device and what extra have those resources actually affected in the continent?
Yeah, thank you. Very good question. First of all, it was a quick response to a degrading security environment on the eastern flank of entire eastern flank of NATO. The presence of U.S. troops in the region, the exercises that were developed under these initiatives, the fact that it increased interoperability, that it brought resources in development of capabilities in the region, at a symbolic and a material level, really creating the more balanced environment. Just to remember, this process was in its process practically. This policy was initiated immediately after Crimea. There was a very, very preoccupying environment in the region with those developments in Crimea, in Ukraine, and of course the presence of American troops on the ground really managed to rebalance at a symbolical level, a perception level, but also in terms of resources and capabilities, the security environment in the region, which was very debalanced, in our opinion.
Dr. Unger, I'm a local practitioner. Originally, my family was from Europe. And I'm wondering, since you're closer to the situation, you mentioned Crimea, how the situation in the Ukraine looks to you at this time.
Well, it's still, thank you for your question. It's still very unstable, many incidents, no real progress in terms of what's happening in southeastern Ukraine. Ukraine is our largest neighbor. As a NATO country, we share the largest frontier of a EU country and a NATO country with Ukraine. We need to see Ukraine stable, engage on a democratic path, and independent in terms of various influences. But again, with all the efforts of the Minsk agreement is far away from being implemented, unfortunately, and this is not good for the overall stability and security of the region. It's good that U.S. has been seen more involved in this issue with the appointment of a special ambassador for envoy for discussions on Ukraine, but we still need to see concrete progress. We're far away from that point now.
Thank you. Sir, you talked about how
Romania is buying the Patriot missile system. You've engaged in this bilateral Aegis Ashore system, again, very helpful to NATO. And then as you look across the Black Sea, we've got Turkey. And Turkey has made agreements to buy the Russian S-400 ballistic missile defense system, their most advanced system. And it's really striking, and it won't tie into the NATO system. I was wondering if you have any sense of what's going on, why would President Erdogan do that, and where do we go from here?
Yeah, well, first of all, Turkey is a critical ally and should be engaged because it's critical for the southern flank of NATO and in a more broader picture for stability in a wider area, including the Middle East. Unfortunately, there were developments in terms of a certain dynamic in the relationship with Russia recently. We hope that's only tactical, and we think that Turkey will, wants to be a trusted ally in NATO. This is its long-term policy. Of course, this is a concrete issue. It's ongoing in terms of discussions that we're having inside the alliance. We hope that it won't affect aspects related to NATO interoperability, and internally, of course, it will be, in case it is finalized, it won't be part of NATO structure of forces. That's clear. But we'll see at the end of this story. Is very preoccupying, of course, but again, for us, Turkey, and for NATO allies, it's a very, very critical ally. We need to keep it engaged. We have an excellent strategic partnership with Turkey ourselves, and we are discussing constantly with them. In fact, we have also a trilateral format with Poland of continuous consultations on the entire eastern and southern flank of NATO. Consultations will take place very soon. Again, it's a systematic format. We meet constantly, and we'll have this discussion in June together with our Polish colleagues. So, a very good question. We hope that, again, Turkey is being engaged as a very critical and important ally for NATO and for us.
Any further questions? If not, please join me in thanking